Yeah, that's really cool.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
man.
really
That
cool.
was really bizarre.
Yeah, that is neat. That's one of the things that brings it home, right?
I think
And
there's
the
a lot of stuff put on
No,
Facebook.
you didn't.
too, man.
Is it? Yep, I
What's
did.
A lot of stuff put on that
Bring it
Facebook
on home,
stuff,
right?
on that Facebook.
That's good. I like
thing
it.
you put on there. I mean, people put up all the business.
Alright, here we
There
go.
she is.
Hello, Kate.
We were stalling.
I'm stalling. Stalling for you.
Well, you'll have to see it, but Dorothy,
I'll check it out.
I gave her a suggestion of what we could do, and then she posted an invitation to it.
Oh, that was what you read this morning? Okay, so she did read.
And
I thought
then
that was from you.
And she said Gracie's opened at 6:30. Did you see that one?
No.
So I wrote her last night. They said, "Can you make a correction?"
Mhm.
Gracie's opens, or this morning maybe. I said Gracie's opens at 7. So
Mhm.
I didn't say anything about $3. Say anything about $3. So she reposted. Didn't say anything about 6 or 7. And
Mhm.
And
We'll
really-
we'll put it up correctly on our
Yeah,
site.
really, because 7 is just performers too, right?
Yeah, we'll put it up.
Well,
We'll
what
figure
I
it
thought
out.
we do is we're going to be ready at 6 as if it was like 7
Mhm.
for the most part.
Memorial's not at
Might even be out here, half
Yeah.
hour. We'll
I
get
know.
together. Then there's no need for it to be more than half an hour.
Okay. We'll post it correctly on our site.
Yeah, I'm not sure yet.
Or even if it's in there after the half hour, we'll say, okay, everybody can come out and mingle. And
Mhm. We'll figure something out.
yeah.
We'll figure it out.
Well, officially welcome everybody to the last Love Your Life workshop
No!
of the year.
Oh!
Is that his joke?
Yeah, is that your joke?
That's the biggest laugh he's gonna
It's
get.
not that good.
2000, what is this, 15? 2015, the last one. Ron, nice to have you. First time?
Yeah, I'm just coming to check it, see what it was all about.
Oh, good.
Hmm?
So welcome to the Love Your Life workshop. And well, I always start with what I call a joke. Depends on if you can decide if it's
Different
a joke.
opinions.
Sounds right.
But, I've heard, well, getting ready to start a new year, sometimes people decide they want to be more thrifty, and I've heard there's nobody more thrifty than Norwegians. And I heard about these two Norwegians, Lauren and Lena. They were so thrifty. And then Lauren died. And Sven, who ran the newspaper in the little town, called, said, "Lena, I heard Lauren died." He said, "Do you want to run an obituary? What do you want it to say?" She said, "Lauren died." He said, "Lorena," he said, "Lena, that's a little brief. Besides, there's a 5-word minimum." She paused. She said, "Lauren died. Boat for sale."
All right, well, see, it's all a matter of opinion. What I like to do. See?
You had to get 5 words in there, yeah.
So, and the joke has nothing to do with what I want to talk about this week. So I want to talk for a few minutes, and then I'll open it up and see if it sparks any thoughts. And the word that was on my mind was the word momentum. And so I want to talk a little bit, or get to eventually. You might say, well, when are we going to talk about momentum? Because I want to talk about momentum. But when I was a school teacher, one of the most common complaints that I ever heard, besides, why do we have to go to school? And all that. His homework is done. But the most common complaint was, "I'm bored," or "This is boring." This is boring. And we've probably all been there at one point in our lives. But which I think, and I really believe that this whole idea of boredom has really come to life more in the 20th century and 21st century, especially the second half of the 20th century. And it's interesting that as life became easier in after the World War II, and has gotten easier and easier in many respects, and as there's more options of things to do, more options of careers to go into, more options of schools, colleges, stores, everything. And then now on TV, there's unlimited options, unlimited options of music to listen to, or just anything to do, games to play. And yet, we still have this epidemic, in a sense, maybe especially of young people, but epidemic of boredom. It's kind of interesting. And I heard of a 104-year-old woman who was interviewed, and they said, well, what's the best thing about being 104? And she said, no peer pressure. And I thought it was interesting because, that's another thing that we have is people around, more and more friends and more people, and yet still bored. Now groups of people who are bored and restless, even though that more and more people. It's kind of interesting. I remember my parents saying when I was growing, and I think that's a phenomenon too, is peer pressure in a sense, is a more recent phenomenon. I think just talking to people like my parents, they said, one change that came about in the 50s and 60s and on up is people being with basically their own age group most of the time. And it wasn't so much that way in past times. And it wasn't so much that way in past centuries that people spent. There was a more mingling of the ages and families, but our society has just changed a bit. So we have this interesting thing of so many options in the world, so much knowledge, and yet this kind of sense of restlessness and boredom. And now I say that because I believe that we were created to be pioneers. I believe that one way that we were created in God's image was to be a pioneer. And I think in a sense you could look at Genesis 1 as the start of a pioneer. So I'm going to start a new world. I'm going to start a new, all this stuff. And so that's how we started. And then when I read the stories of the Bible, I read stories of pioneers, guys who set out and were adventurous. And I love the story of Abraham. Abraham was called to leave his father's place, and Abraham already had tons of possessions. Could have easily have stayed and been happy where he was, but he left. And he went on this adventure, if you want to call it. It was a long adventure, in a sense, a pioneer, going to a new place, not really even sure where he was going. I love stories of my grandfather, who I didn't know really well, but I was told that as a young kid that they moved from Arkansas to West Texas and then later to New Mexico. They moved, he followed as a young boy, 5-year-old, and followed a covered wagon, walked across Texas, and that's my grandfather. It's not that far away. And so that whole idea of this just moving out west, and then even my dad moving from the west to the east, kind of this moving to a new place and experiencing a lot of that. So I think of that, and I think that we probably all in our own way sometimes deal with a sense of, I don't know if even boredom is the right way, but being maybe stuck in a rut, spinning our wheels at times. And maybe even if it's not about what we're doing, but maybe even mentally or spiritual ruts. And alongside of that, I believe, is this yearning or this call or this belief that we were created to be more adventurous. So what do people do? They do bucket lists. Nothing wrong with that. They seek ways of being adventurous in life, and I think that can be good. That can wake us up. But I like what there's an author, American author named Eudora Welty, and she said, all serious daring starts from within. And she said something, I'm paraphrasing, something like, I grew up in a sheltered life, but she said, a sheltered life can also produce a daring life because all serious daring starts from within. So the kind of pioneering I'm looking for is internal. That then is exhibited in our lives. But that we have this sense of every day, in And we may have to remind ourselves, because it's not like we can do something new and exciting every day, you know. I think probably even if we got to know the lives of people who we think are living adventurous lives, they get up and they kind of do the same thing every day to some degree, or it's long days. But to have a sense of adventure about our lives, even through the difficult times, that we realize that we're part of an adventure, we're part of a daring life, a daring life. Now, what does that mean? Well, I talked a lot last week about Jesus and some of the Sermon on the Mount. So going back through that, I think that he kind of spoke to that when he said, "Be salt and be light." That he was appealing to that part of our nature that yearns for a daring life, and not to be stuck in a rut, not to feel like I'm going nowhere or I'm part of nothing. You know, and I think he spoke to that from the very beginning when he says, you know, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for yours is the kingdom of heaven." What a juxtaposition of ideas. You know, the poor in spirit. You people feel like you're nothing, that you deserve nothing, or maybe that you inherit nothing because other people are the ones inheriting everything. So, but you can tap into the kingdom of heaven. You can tap into the eternities. You can tap into the spiritual eternities. And I think, in a sense, creating that sense of wonder and adventure as he began to talk to them, and then led up to, "You're salt and you're light. You're the light of the world." And so what does that mean? That's all sounds good. But then he gets into this very practical kind of stuff that I think describes for us an adventurous life. Like he says, "Well, you've heard it was said, 'Don't murder.'" He said, "Well, you know," I say, "Don't even be angry with your brother or sister." And you think about that really calls for some, you know, that kind of wakes you up. For most of us anyway, not being a murderer is like, we can kind of stay away from there, hopefully. You know, but to deal with anger, and I think really he was awakening them to an adventurous life, a daring life. You know, will you dare to go inside yourself and deal with anger? You know, think about anger and think that maybe we were called not to even be angry. And I think there is a place for certain kinds of anger. I don't think Jesus was saying there's not. He was angry. You know, he was angry with the Pharisees at times because of their cold hearts, their hard hearts. But just in our general day-to-day walk with each other in our relationships, he said, "Don't be angry." And I love that. Then he says, so he translated, "Well, here's one thing that looks like." He said, you're at church for them it had been Saturday or whatever, and you bring your gift to put in, you know, you give your gift, we would pass the basket or whatever. Then you remember your brother who has something against you. Not you have something, you just remember a brother that you got a problem. He says, "Stop right there." He says, "Leave. Don't even put your gift in. Go take care of that. And then come put your gift in." And I wonder if people were sitting there thinking, "Wow, is he serious?" Can you imagine that really happening in what that takes in terms of, you know, actually stopping what people might think, say, "Wait, I can't do that. I know I got to take care of something." And what that person, how they would feel when you go approach them, and the kinds of things that we just let go and let go and let go, and maybe they build up, and maybe relationships just like fizzle, but this person dared to stop right what they were doing and go take care of it in an unusual way, in an unusual time, you know. So I think Jesus was saying, look, the way to live is kind of a daring way. It's not the way everybody else is going. It's not the way that necessarily the flow of the crowd. And he'll say later, don't go the same road as the big crowds, as the multitudes. Go this narrow path that only a few people go. And I think that he was talking about this kind of life, a life of really compassion and love that dares to do these little things, that dares to step out and do these little things. And we see that sometimes with the people that he was with. You know, he goes through Jericho, and he sees Zacchaeus, you know, a hated tax collector. And we know all he said was, "Come down. I want to have lunch with you. I want to go to your home." The next thing we know, Zacchaeus is opening his heart and saying he's going to pay back everybody he's stolen money from, 4 times over, 10 times over, you know. And it reminds me of Jesus saying, you know, stop what you're doing and do this daring thing. And so we, you know, I think you can kind of see that Jesus called his disciples to live in a daring way. So anyway, so I said we're going to talk about momentum. So what does this have to do with momentum? Is I think about all these little things that that we might feel compelled to do, as we might feel stagnant spiritually, or stagnant emotionally, or stagnant in our lives, and yet here's this. Jesus kind of can open up to us and our eyes this amazing possibilities of living a daring pioneer life. Which, by the way, I think each one of us is called to be a pioneer of our own story. You know, a pioneer of our own story, and a pioneer of our own dreams, a pioneer of our own aspirations, a pioneer of our own gifts and talents and things that is unique to each one of us. So how do we do that? You know, if we just kind of follow the peer pressure, that is, and try to follow the crowd or the normal way of doing things, nothing happens. And so, you know, my thing I'm trying to keep in my head, or I get this, is sometimes it takes less talk, more steps. Less talk, more steps. And I think in a sense Jesus was saying that. When you come to the altar, it's less talk, less religious, more steps in the right direction to take care of things. You know, less talk, more steps. And in a sense, I think that's what he was talking about when he said, in that same chapter in Matthew, and one of these little things I've heard talked about and argued about my whole life. And to be honest, I don't know if, unless we lived in that time, if we can really get a hold on what he was saying. But I'll give you my take on it. He said, now he talked about oaths, taking oaths. I can barely say that. And he says, so don't swear by heaven or hell, and don't swear by anything, but just let your yes be yes, and your no be no. And he said, anything more than that comes from the evil one. Well, that's kind of a weird thing to say. You know, so I've heard it debated, so if we say, yes, I promise, is that evil? You know, and I think maybe we're missing the point if we're trying to make a little right and wrong in exactly what he was saying. Is it wrong to say certain words? But think about what he's saying. He's saying, let your life be so strong that when you say yes or no, that's all anybody needs. Because they know you're going to do it. They know that your life and your words match up. Now, none of us is there, but I think that's one thing that makes Jesus' life so incredible, is that his life and his words were 100% consistent. All Jesus had to do was say yes, and they knew it would be done. All he had to do was say no, and they knew he meant it. You know, and so Jesus is talking about the kind of personality, the kind of this daring spirit that would dare to leave their gift at the altar and go take care of it. This daring spirit that would actually, if somebody compelled them to go a mile, they would dare to go 2. You know, this daring spirit that says, you know, I don't need to pile on all these promises and oaths. I can just say yes. You know, why? Because they're taking steps. You know. Now, the one thing I know is that when you take one step, the second step becomes easier, no matter what you do. You know, we went out and did a little 2 miles this morning, and the hardest thing is getting your clothes on and getting out and taking the first step. You know, but once you take that first step, the next step becomes a little easier, no matter what you're going to do. And I think that's the same thing, and I think Jesus was compelling people to take steps, less talk, less promising, fewer oaths, fewer religious words and more steps. Just more steps. And I think that's especially true in these things that have to do with our relationships with other people. And I think that's where the pioneer spirit really comes into play most. It's not about breaking new ground. It's not about inventing things. It's not about being the first to. There's not a whole lot more left to discover. Well, I say no, but if you're in the right field, it probably is. But the pioneer spirit, as far as living adventurously every day, and putting people first, and putting compassion, and putting compassion and putting love first, but to take fewer steps. To say fewer words, and take more steps. Glenn, you told us about that thing Tuesday that Google did that, where people who Google had 3 groups, and in one group they sat them down, so we want you to exercise next week. They came back later, and how many had exercised?
29%.
29% had exercised. The second group, they told them all the benefits of exercise. Came back a week later, 39% had exercised. The next group, they told them to exercise, and they said, here, make a schedule for yourself when you're going to do it. And so that was kind of taking the first step. And then they went out and they did it, and 91%, I think, had exercised. And so I think sometimes with these things that are matters of our heart, matters of things that we say, it's almost like that. We see it, and it goes out of our mind like that first group. Or we even remind ourselves how good it would be to follow through and do these things. He says, leave your gift at the altar and go fix this relationship. We think, yeah, that's a good idea, but we don't do it. But taking that first step, sometimes just taking that first step, we build momentum. Once we take one step, we build momentum, and then it becomes easier and easier. So anyway, that's kind of my end of the year, beginning of the new year, and whether you're into New Year's resolutions or not. I kind of am, but I feel like I make them all the time. But I really believe that it's a constant call to be adventurous every day, in that even learning to smile at someone or to recognize somebody or get out of our own head, that's a call to adventure. To wake up is a call to adventure. And so we can all help each other in that. So that's what I had to share this morning. So hope it was helpful.